Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thank you so much, as always, for making your way here, checking out the series. You know what to do. If you like what you see, like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week. So it's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I am so excited to be talking with Lauren Mayberry about the brand new album from Chvrches. It's called Screen Violence, and it is so good. Hello.
Oh, thank you. What an introduction. That's lovely. Yeah, that's so nice.
I mean, yeah, I'm going to start just with totally complimenting you so much, because I was listening to this record even more this week leading up to the interview, and I was driving with it on, and I said, this is one of those records that I feel like I'm going to be nostalgic about even in 20 years. Like, oh, I wish I could go back to the first time I heard that record.
Jeez, well, thanks, man. Like, it's really kind of you to say. Like, it's weird having the album out now, because I think for so long, I'm sure every person you talk to is like, this is our best record about every record. And yeah, everybody says it about everything. But when we finished it, I think there was definitely a sense between the three of us, and we're British, so we don't like to say these things, but we were like, I think we did it. I think this is, to me, I'm like, yeah, we thought we'd made the quintessential Chvrches record, but it's really nice to hear somebody like you say that. We're like, okay, other people do agree. That's good. It's not just narcissism.
Yeah, well, that's the thing though, because usually fans, speaking as fans, you like your favorite album of an artist usually is the one that you first heard from the artist, whatever your entrance point is for that artist. And my entrance point for you all were albums ago, but this is it. I agree with you. Like, this is the one. This is the best one. So
I mean, no pressure there.
Pressure.
No, thank you. Like, I feel like when we finished it, I think we were all sure that we had done our best. The best version of what we brought to the table was on that record. And I think for me, like, I've never really regret anything we've done. I'm proud of everything we've done, because everything is like a snapshot of where you're at the time. And I can hand on heart say that every record was the best we could have done at that time. But I don't know, when I stepped away from this one, I was like, because the lyrics are slightly different than they were on previous Chvrches records. And I think I kind of stopped applying what should I write because I'm in an electro band, or because I'm in an alternative band, a pop band, whatever. It was more just like, well, what writers who do I love? Whose writing do I love? Why am I not letting myself do? Like, this is what my notebooks are full of, is this stuff. So why do I not put it in the songs? Why am I always like, oh, that just lives in this little section over here just for me? And it's just been really, I don't know, encouraging. I hate it when people say humble. I'm so humbled, but very humbling to be like, oh, right. Like, when you're actually doing something that is honest and not fabricated, it connects with people better, right, I guess. Right. I don't know.
You might have already said it actually, but can you pinpoint exactly for you what's different about the style of writing? I think I just took off the self-imposed constraints that were there. Like, I think, well, because I've definitely done a lot of like learning in public with Chvrches. Like, I was learning to write lyrics for this kind of band in public. I haven't really written that. I've written in one band before this, but I wasn't the main vocalist. It was shared vocals, or I was playing drums, or I was playing keyboards. So I feel like we did a lot of growing up in public, and I think that's been great in a lot of ways, because it means you didn't overthink anything. But then I kind of got to a point where, like, on the third record, I was like wanting to make lyrics that were more specifically, these are pop lyrics, and that means like dialing things to a certain space. But then when I came away from it, I was like, I like the stories I told in the verses more than what I did in the choruses, and I wonder how to do that better next time round. And I guess we were lucky that some of the more negative life experiences that we've had led us to this concept. And then I think because we were just locked in a house alone for a year, like, what do you do when you're in a band and all the bullshit around a band disappears, and all that ceases to exist is like, all that remains is the band itself. So to me, I was like, why would I waste time writing something that I'm like, oh, I think that's what people would like me to say? That seems like a strange way to make music. And not that we've done that all the time, but there's certain moments I look at and I'm like, yeah, it wasn't fully me. It was putting on a character, which is fun if that's what you want to do. I see David Bowie posters behind you, if that's something you're purposefully doing in order to further tell your stories, then great. But if you're putting it on to, I don't know, to occupy a space that's not necessarily comfortable for you or yours to own, then it feels a bit odd. So I don't know. It's weird to say I had an aha moment, but to me, I'm like, I don't know how to, like, at this point, anything I've been writing since then, I'm like, well, no, that's the standard you should hold yourself to. So keep going.
Keep going.
I hope. I don't know.
Keep going. So the space that you all are in, it's so interesting. And I'm actually going to jump out of the album and then take the long way back around in to do something more recent, because you all just released a cover of one of my all-time favorite songs. And I'm talking about Cry Little Sister. Let's see if I can get this. Got my old copy of the Lost Boys soundtrack here. Yeah. So that's
Precious.
that's originally, come from this Lost Boys soundtrack, and it fits so well, of course, what we're getting in this record. So I wanted to start there actually. Why did this one arrive? Why, what made you all tackle this one for the Netflix movie that it's just hopped on?
Well, we've been talking about this film and that song specifically since basically the beginning of the band, and we've tried a number of times. Whenever radio stations are like, hey, do a cover for us, we're like, what about this? And they're like, no, why don't you just choose something in the top 40? And we're like, yeah. But yeah, I feel like that's what's so cool about this moment for the band, is that horror movies and those kinds of movies that feel nostalgic to you because of the sounds and the stories of that time of your life, like that's always been a big part of what we talk about, is how we started to bond when we were starting the band. We had nothing in common. It was like these were the things that we talked about, and I feel like it's always been in the background of Chvrches somewhere, but we've never really done anything with it. And yeah, when it was coming up to making of this record, I made like a massive list of like, here's things that we could cover, not thinking that anybody would let us. And then it was just such strange and fortuitous timing, because the people that are making Nightbooks, which is the Netflix film, said there was a lot of references to Lost Boys throughout their film and throughout their story. And then the original is in there for a snippet, and then our versions at the end. And we got this email being like, it's just going to need to be a really quick turnaround, and the band might not know the song, but they should check it out. And I was like, yeah, I think we know the song, But the lyrics are quite odd, I will say. Because we had to do, the brief was they wanted a kind of slower, more kind of not ballady, but they didn't want the 80s bombast. And when I had to like look at the lyrics, I was like, cocaine's a hell of a drug. Like, I don't know.
'Twas the season at the time. And I loved, by the way, that one of you all posted, you all had hung with Kiefer at some points, so it's sort of a circle.
Hung, I feel like he would not describe it as having hung out with us. I think he was accosted in a radio station hallway, and he was very kind and stood near us while we were like, you're eating maggots, and he was like, yeah, no, that's great, thank you, I've done many things that aren't that, but sure. But yeah, so I feel like, and that would have been on the first album we met him, so like 2014 or something. And every so often we're like, remember that time we met Keith?
Now he's going to be much more impressed. The star has risen. He's like, now he's going to call it hanging with you guys. That's what's
maybe. Well, apparently he's a musician as well, right? He makes maybe if he needs, Ian and Martin are in the production game. If he needs anybody to produce his records, I'm sure they'd be more than honored to know.
Further down the spiral, to quote Nine Inch Nails, John Carpenter is also a part of the story, because he sent some remixes. Yeah. Pretty well. I mean, everything just kind of lines up right now with this world, and that must have been its own experience with Carpenter.
Oh man, like I look back at last year, and I'm like, obviously all the terrible things that we all know about, and all the terrible times that I had in my house, being like, what if my parents die and I can't get back to the UK and I won't be able to see it, and all those things. But there were other times where I was like in this strange bubble where like anything seems possible almost, because everybody was more open to things. And I remember walking about my kitchen being like, maybe just trying to think of ways to tell the story of the record without touring. And I was like, what if we get like regular club remixes, but we do remixes from composers, like reinterpretations of things. And I texted our manager being like, somebody like John Carpenter. And then I was like, I'll go away, make a list. And then by the time I made my list, he was like, okay, well, I've emailed John Carpenter and him and his team are down to do this, and they've chosen the song. And I was like, what in the fucking, like, it feels like for a very dark macabre record. It was really blessed in a lot of ways. It feels, and like Clive Barker, who is an artist and writer that I love, and I think he's written some of the best stories in the horror genre. He did a piece of art for a zine that we did, and obviously Robert Smith is on the record. I feel like the dark forces have blessed this album. I don't know what happened.
That's what makes it, I guess, so beautiful. And you all have talked about it. You've talked about how the horror genre is so important to this record, and as you were saying, to the band, all throughout the years. And I guess the most obvious question is why? Why does it play such an important part? Because you've already alluded to, having some rough spots leading into the recording of this record. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is, if I just throw some assumptions out there and use my imagination, it's not hard to draw the parallels of horror movies and maybe what's been going on in your life. Is that too much of a reach?
No, there was definitely a conscious double meaning to it when we came back to the title. So we were touring, it would have been late summer 2019, and the beginning of 2019 was quite an up and down time for the band. There was a lot of stuff happening around the band. I think that's probably the most I've ever been written about in like non-music specific press, but not for anything really to do with me, kind of. And there was a lot of stuff that went along with that, and I never wanted to seem like boo-hoo, white woman's tears, victim, whatever. But I don't have any media training, and no amount of media training can prepare you for waking up to that kind of stuff every day. And people can say, oh, the internet's not real, but if you wake up to an inbox full of people saying they want to murder you, it feels pretty real. Like, you can't really tell your brain, you can't, like, consciously you can process it in some way, but I think that it was odd to get to the end of that touring and be like, oh right, some stuff has gone a bit wrong inside my cranium that I need to go figure out. So I think, for the guys, the concept resonated with them because they love that era of filmmaking and the composers that worked on those films, and a lot of the synths that they use on those soundtracks are the synths that we have. And I felt like it would be just a fun kind of returning home to things that we love. And then for me, I don't know, I guess, I hope it doesn't sound too pretentious, but at first I thought it was going to be purely just a horror concept thing, and it would be escapist, and it would feel nice to not have to stand in my own shoes for a minute. But then after like a couple of songs, I was like, it's not that though, is it? And I think that that it's not that, but we're just going to keep pretending. And I think was really great in terms of writing different things, because you can tell personal perspectives and have this imagery as the landscape. And I think a lot of people, but a lot of women especially, who love horror, I think I watch it because I find something in it that makes me feel like I'm not insane, because I think a lot of people, but especially women, can relate to the sensation of being watched and being hunted, and the bargaining and the running, and you have to keep running, you have to keep running, you have to keep just justifying for yourself and trying to make yourself safe in a universe that doesn't feel safe for you.
Right.
So I don't know. I think for me, I was like, it would be fun to take those ideas and make them personal. And so it was. It's not as depressing as it sounds. It sounds really depressing when we talk about it. But I guess, it's been interesting to reflect on the record, because we finished it like last November, maybe. And I guess when we've been listening through it more recently, yes, I feel like it delves into a lot of heavy topics, but I also think for me, it sounds like it's trying to talk about perseverance, like trying to find a place of peace in a space in life where it doesn't feel peaceful for anybody, I don't think. So that's my hope. Yeah,
there were songs on here. Like, I felt like there were moments where you're being very straightforward about, there's a lot of moments where it sounds like people are trying to tell you who to be. And I don't get the sense that you give into that, but you can obviously hear that. I mean, he said, she said has those moments in there. How Not to Drown, I feel like has those moments in there. But like I guess what I'm getting at is I feel the perseverance in there as well, along with the struggle.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been incredibly lucky in my life and in this band specifically. Like, I wouldn't change any of it. I'm so grateful for it. And yeah, I think it's just, for me, I'm like, it's always been a duality in this band. Like, even since the beginning, people are always like, oh, Lauren, she's so forthright and she doesn't do this. She said this and blah, blah, blah. But then I'm like, that's not actually how I'm like a very mushy, soft, emotional person. But I feel like I can advocate for myself when I need to. But I don't know. It's like every time you do one of those things, it chips away a little bit. It's like a little chip, little chip, little chip. And then I think by the time I got to the end of 2019, like when all that stuff was happening, I was like, our manager was like, do we pull the shows? Do we go home? What do we do? And I'm very pig-headed about things. So I'm like, no, we're not going to cancel any of this stuff because you show no weakness. You show no mercy. You keep going. But then by the end of it, I was like, okay. But after a certain amount of those things chipping away, it is going to take a toll on people. And people not talking about that and not writing about that feels weird, you know? I don't know.
And then inevitably you get the words, the themes that find themselves on here. There's a lot of drowning on this record. There's a lot of falling. There's a lot of dying. And I want to repeat what you said. It's not a depressing record somehow. It's a very fun album.
Yeah, I guess that was the trick, I think. Like sometimes, like a lot of the lyrics came from stuff that was written in like notebooks over the course of time. I just write stuff down as I think about it. And I look back at things and like a lot of the lyrics on How Not to Drown were written in like a big screed that was like 3 or 4 pages long. And I'm like, well, a lot of this is a bit much. Like not in terms of feeling it, but in terms of putting it in a song. Like I think that's the trick of the light, I suppose. It's like, how do you, and especially with the horror concept, I think that gave more space to say stuff that is quite macabre and is quite sinister, but it's more allowed because it feels escapist in a way. And then those bits can be the escapist moments, and the more honest bits are just the more straightforward, raw parts, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know what that's about. I should probably seek out some kind of help for that. I don't know why it's always like, I guess water, drowning, overwhelm. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
I took it as.
I don't know.
Yeah. There was one line on here that I did definitely want to ask about. Now that was in Good Girls. It's right at the beginning too, when you it's the kill your idols line.
Yes.
Because that's like what I, thinking back and forth on that, it's like, oh, is this something like the way her fans' relationship with her? Like you can, be a fan and suddenly you're, all this, because you deal with a lot, sometimes as the focus of the group. But I didn't know also if you were talking about your own idols.
I guess I didn't really think about, maybe there was an element of that in the subconscious of it. I think for me, it was more about like that line is something I wrote in my notebook after a very long conversation in a pub with a bunch of friends, and everybody was talking about how, what's too much in terms of artists that you love. What do they have to do for you to not want to consume their art anymore? And I think I was definitely on the more sensitive end of the scale. And then as I was sitting back looking, I'm like, yeah, but everybody else at this table is a dude. And then there was a point where I was like, oh yeah, we don't really have these conversations about that many female artists. So we certainly wouldn't go to this length to excuse the behavior of female artists, because, and I do think that, the two things someone can be an incredible artist and a horrible misogynist, a racist, a sexual abuser. Like those things can be true. And I guess for me, I don't like, especially for music, and especially if the person's a lyricist, I think it's when you're listening to music, if you're a lyrics person, like it's incredibly vulnerable to let that person into your emotional space. And if I know that you think really egregious, horrendous things, then it makes it hard for me to be vulnerable with you, I guess. But what I was struck by when we were having these conversations, I was like, yeah, but when we're talking about Roman Polanski, Woody Allen, R. Kelly, Morrissey, I was like, none of the things they're accused of would impact anybody at this table. So it's easier for you to make that separation because it would never be emotional for you. It's always going to be academic and abstract. And then I sat on it for a few years, and then we made a pop song out of it. I don't know. Again, it sounds depressing, but I think for me, I'm like, there's two modes of Chvrches writing. There's the one where I'm like, I can say all the things that I actually really don't like about myself and I'm really ashamed of. But there's the other part where I'm like, but wouldn't it be great if I was actually like this and I could say these things? And I think Good Girls falls into that category where I'm like, come on, guys, off we go. And I don't know if that happens in real life, but it's nice to have those two vibes on it.
Sure. You had me thinking about that. I can't name one woman artist who's ever disappointed me like that. And I can name plenty of male artists who have disappointed me like that.
Well, and not that women, especially straight white women, can be terrible. Like, there's been a lot of disappointments in those areas in recent years, but it's a different kind of conversation, and I think it is easier for me when we've had discussions about it within the band and within my friendship group, because who were the women I loved when I was like 18? I'm like, it was Alanis Morissette and Liz Phair, PJ Harvey, and I'm like, oh, my unproblematic faves, like.
Which I just saw Alanis and Shirley, so Garbage last night. Actually,
did
just caught
you?
the show. I did.
I'm going. So no spoilers. No. But yes, I mean, and Cat Power's on the tour now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we walked in right at the end of her set, unfortunately. But I've seen her a lot, thankfully, and I will see her again. But yeah,
what a heady lineup. Whew.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll handle it. I might need to just go in a wetsuit, because I will just sob too much. Like angry sobbing, sad sobbing, happy sobbing, just sobbing. I think.
Sobbing.
Yeah.
I know we got to wrap up. You've already brought it up, but I'll quickly hit it here. Not that you haven't talked about him a lot, but you do have Robert Smith on here, and I know that was, from what it sounds like, its own credible experience. So I would ask though, you create with someone like that a hero. I don't know if you would call him a hero, but I certainly do. But there's that person, the humanized version of that person. I guess is what I'm asking. Do you still allow yourself to give someone like him the myth of Robert Smith and the Cure while you're being very personal? Does that exist? That type of thing?
I think he's just been so incredibly kind to us and so generous, like creatively and otherwise. Like, my understanding of just having done a couple of interviews with him to talk about the record, and from talking to him a bit about it outside of that, is that he's very aware of what the Cure means to people. And I think there's just such, again, generosity and kindness in that. And I feel like, I wouldn't do it at him, because I think that would be uncool. But yeah, I think that he's very like self-deprecating. And if anybody says anything nice about him during those calls, he's like, oh, and just recoils. But there is a kindness in the way that he talks about fans and people that love the Cure, and people that contact him who are now in bands who love the Cure. And I think a lot of people wouldn't have that, I don't know, that kindness of heart or that self-awareness or something. And I think it's quite rare. Like, I watched that carpool karaoke business, but it's hit and miss for me personally. But I watched the Paul McCartney one, and he's back in Liverpool, and I was like, yeah, again, another person that I'm like, well, you are a person with an interior life and your own existence, and you exist as a human. And sometimes stuff in the public eye, the tiny degree I've experienced it, is weird, because you're like a concept, you're abstract to people, for better, in good ways and in bad ways. It's very odd. You kind of aren't a person anymore. So you need to try and separate those things. But yeah, knowing what you mean to somebody, or what his music means to somebody, like, I think there's just a very specific kind of kindness that's involved in that. And it's just bloody lovely, isn't it? It's just really nice.
Well, that was the obvious parallel I was going to draw, because of course there are people that look at you the same way, that have that odd mythologized relationship. I was thinking, actually, bringing up Shirley Manson, like in the early days when I was younger, so much of my concept of who they were was from the music videos, because there's so much of a world created in there. And I will wrap this up by just saying, I love the world that you all create.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate that. And we had a lot of time inside to plan this one, so I'm glad that we used our time wisely and not just telly all the time.
But the telly that you did have, it worked out for what inspired this as well. So
yes, there was a lot of weird afternoons watching inappropriate content for the time of day, and I'm like, it's research, leave me. But
well, screen violence is so good. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it. I've really enjoyed this.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me. And hopefully we'll see you when we tour. If we're allowed to tour, then that'll be fun.
Absolutely. I'll be there. Take care, and we'll see you then.
Awesome. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.